Satsantum Sunasnat, Daryl Hilaire, Lummi Nation. This is our Children of the Setting Sun. Part of us was actually my ex-wife and my grandson were on the way down, but they couldn't make it. But introduce yourself and we'll...
My name's Ellie Smith.
To the video. Mark Nichols.
Natasha Fry.
And John Carroll.
They were supposed to sing their names, but that's okay. We'll let them slide. But yeah, we're a 501c3 nonprofit that was formed just over a couple years ago. But we've been around since like 1920. And Children of the Setting Sun is a dance group that my great-grandfather formed back then. And has seen the need to educate the newcomers about who we are and where we come from. And he didn't speak English, but he had a son who learned the English language, and they traveled around, you know, and you'll see some of what they left behind in Seattle and in the museums. You go online and you can type in Joe Hilaire or Frank Hilaire, and there they are. And they were very open about sharing a little bit about our lifeway. In our lifeway in our language, it's called Shalangan, or way of life. And the way of life is how you conduct yourself and the things that you're connected to and the relationship that you have with each other and with the water and with the land and all living things. So we took on that name because it's our responsibility, and that responsibility was left by Chaitalak Frank Hilaire. When he did all that work and then he got ready to die, he said, "Keep my fires burning." And so that's our responsibility, is to continue that work. And that work takes us to these places that we didn't expect to end up in, like an ACH meeting. But it's really important work. We understand the mission of ACH. We understand where health disparities come from. And it's summarized very beautifully in this little book. And that little book, you know, don't consider us like a Christian organization promoting Christian doctrine, but it's a book that was written by a Catholic priest. And our relationship with Christianity has been somewhat bumpy and somewhat tragic. But within that tragedy, there are certain people that come along that say, "No, you got it right, and we love you." And that's what he did. And it takes you through time, and it takes you through those things that happen from contact to today, the tremendous amount of trauma that was experienced by our people, and then those things that are actually getting us through those times to today, where I like to summarize it with the idea that we're emerging. What I mean by that is my great-grandfather was, he only spoke the Lummi language. But then as a result of boarding school, as a result of alcohol, as a result of our kids being taken away, all that was lost. And it skipped a few generations. But now my grandkids, they were in the womb, in the smokehouse, listening to the language and listening to the songs, getting the cadence down to how to be a good person. And the smokehouse is a place where you practice respect. And that's all it is. It's just how you bring people into the floor and recognize them and pay the ultimate respect of who they are and where they come from. And that's really emerging now, and you see that everywhere now. And we'll get into that when we get into our invitations about how we can better understand Indian tribes and what they do, and why they act the way they act, and why they engage and don't engage. There's different levels of that, and we'd like to share in that education if we could. So we have, I have to tell you a story. I was on our council for 15 years, and I got assigned to go testify before the House Resource Committee in Washington, D.C., and Representative Yates and all those great leaders back then, who worked together back then. And I was in a room like this, and I had a PowerPoint, and I failed miserably because I don't come from here, I come from here. And then when it's on the paper, it's like, looks like a foreign language to me. So I have my interpreter here, so. But Natasha's going to take us through that, and then we'll get into the themes that we feel emerged from our conversation with tribal leaders, tribal administrators, and then really want to engage a little bit with all of you with a showing of a video, and then take us through a practice of how what that means to you, so it can better inform the work that needs to be done here. So that's what we'll do.
So
One more thing I have to share. This song that I tried to sing came from my uncle, Jack Kagi. Mark and I went over to visit him the other day. He's in the rest home. He's 85. And Chetalak, Frank Hilaire, got Children of the Setting Sun going. And when he died, his son, Joe Hilaire, kept it going. Then he died. Then our uncle, Jack Kagi, who we met the other day, he kept it going as well as like 5 or 6 of his first cousins. And they all sing different versions of that song. So I went and learned it from him, but then I'll go see my Uncle Smitty, and then he'll correct me, right? So
Okay.
we're going to do the PowerPoint, I guess, and then we'll get into some more work.
Okay, so this first slide I have up is our common goals that we share with the ACH that we worked out with Liz several months ago, going into the process of developing a work plan for 2019. And the first one is to build understanding and community awareness through education and relationship building, facilitate collaboration between governmental and non-governmental organizations, facilitate programming and collaboration with subject area experts practicing indigenous approaches to wellness, support local and statewide initiatives using a strengths-based approach to targeted universalism, increase access and equity of tribal communities and individuals in relation to preventive wellness and connecting to healthcare delivery systems. Educate community partners about tribal governance, leadership, and traditional approaches using a strength-based approach to targeted universalism, and to support tribal nation building through health and wellness. So these are kind of like the shared, some of these are a little bit more in the wheelhouse of ACH, and some of them are more with us working with the Tribal Alignment Committee and the Haas Institute as a access and equity partner. And so this is just an outline. This is very much just an overview of the partners ACH as an overall organization, the Tribal Alignment Committee, the Northwest Washington Indian Health Board, and the Haas Institute. And we anticipate that that will grow a little bit as we get further into the work. If there's other access and equity partners that are coming in to the ACH, they would of course be part of our work as well. The 8 tribes of the North Sound and the 5 that are already part of the Northwest Washington Indian Health Board and the ACH will be working with more readily, and then the other 3 we're going to be working on relationship building and participation. And then we'll be doing a whole group 101 level educational program about tribal treaty rights, sovereignty, self-determination, self-governance, tribal governance, tribal protocol, relations, etiquette, and sensitivities. And if anyone here doesn't know, the since time immemorial is the Washington State curriculum mandate. And so also relating some of the work that we're doing back to the public education system. There's a lot of moving parts with this because the tribal relations touch on a lot of things, and so just mapping out the different entities that we're going to be connecting with and working with is one of our first steps. Our scope of work crosses over obviously with the shared objectives and goals that were in the first slide, but this is that's okay. What do? I don't have my PowerPoint. Okay. That's okay. It's back up. So our scope of work includes identifying accessible pathways to healthcare delivery that will result in increased access by tribal members as individuals, identifying accessible community-based research methodologies resulting in increased participation by tribal communities in measurements of wellness and healthcare decision making. And I think this really goes back to your comment in the last discussion about getting more community commitment from the beginning. So that's going to be a big focus, and we believe that one important tier of this is defining what measurements are and what a research study is in a tribal community to get that information. And relationship building between the partner agencies and the 8 tribal communities. And we're kind of going back and forth between making plans and getting feedback, and it's kind of an ongoing needs assessment. And I think it will be throughout at least probably the first 2/3 of the year, and being adaptable and adjusting to the feedback that we get. And then documenting the partnership and program development process so that the tribal relationship building piece can be replicable statewide, possibly. So far we've made contact with tribal healthcare leaders, and we've done a small amount of outreach to the 60 partner agencies, but we haven't started getting feedback from the overall ACH 60 partner agencies. We've gotten pretty good feedback from the tribal partners. And these are the themes that came out from that feedback. That's from the tribal leaders, not from all of the whole group. So there's, do you want to go through some
We'll
of
go back
these?
and forth. Yeah.
Okay.
The first one's sovereignty, and sovereignty means that some tribes don't want to work with the state. They feel their relationships with the federal government. Under the U.S. Constitution, what's been agreed to between tribes and the federal government's recognized under the Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution, where treaties are the supreme law of the land, and then the Commerce Clause, where it establishes that relationship between tribes and the federal government, which mandates the tribe, it's a legal responsibility of the tribe to meet their trust responsibility. You know, the tribes and the federal government have that trust responsibility. That's where everything lies, you know, and it's defended in that manner. But, you know, I think those that see opportunities see, well, also we're part of the state of Washington. We should figure out how we can access more opportunities to meet those healthcare deficiencies. So that's an ongoing process with the different tribes are at different levels of understanding how they want to build a relationship. So those sovereignty issues are pretty complex.
So then the next one was prevention. Did you want me to talk about
Sure.
that? Okay, so prevention came up as in a couple of different ways. There was like very literally, like an example would have been one of the challenges is trying to get Indian Health Services to recognize mid-level dental health therapists. So that's something where prevention is the approach, and there's education issues in getting to that point. But then there was also quite a bit of feedback about the paradigm between Western medicine and indigenous wellness, so which is a more preventive, holistic approach. So prevention includes, you know, literal delivering preventatively, and also the Shillelaghan and like the life way approach to wellness. And then the next one was education about tribes. You wanna
Education about tribes is we have 8 tribes in our region here, and they're at different levels of self-governance. Let's put it that way. There's Lummi and Swinomish and Tulalip, where they have a compact with the United States government, and it's for self-governance. So that means that all those trust responsibilities that the federal government is supposed to fulfill with tribes has been contracted to tribes, rather than have the federal government provide healthcare and police and planning and education. Congress just allocates the money directly to 2 tribes, and they do it themselves. And so they have a very different paradigm than those tribes that are non-self-governance, and they're saying, no, federal government, you take care of it. And it's funny that we're sitting here, because that used to be the BIA office across the street when I was a kid. So if I wanted to get a scholarship to go to college, I would apply across the street there. The application would go to Portland, to Albuquerque, to Washington, D.C., and then back again. And then by that time, the school year's over. And that's true, because I was the project manager when we built our clinic back in the 70s. And I had to get an appraisal done on the land that we were going to buy to build our clinic. So I did that. I got an appraisal, brought it here, went to Portland, went to Albuquerque, and came back. And by that time, it was expired, or it's a window for those, that kind of thing to happen. And we passed. There was so many inefficiencies. Well, some tribes are still in that boat. So that's what I mean about how we need to know about that, the kind of constitutions they operate under. And then really, what's really important to me, and important, that's why I like to be here, because we have this government that's been formed under the Indian Reorganization Act of 1930. All tribes are set up like our city or county, where they have a chief executive, and they have a legislative body, and they have courts. And that's pretty familiar to you. But in a tribal community, there's this other traditional form of government. The respect for the grandmother, knowing that the speaker on the floor is not the leader, he's the speaker, that the head of the house is the leader, but you also consult the spiritual leader. So you go through that, and there's this balance of power that's kind of like a holistic balance of power, that if you can see that, you're going to navigate much better in a tribal community on both a personal level and a professional level. So if you have big ideas, you just got to recognize if you might be talking to the chairman, but did you talk to grandma, Because if you got that covered, you're going to be okay, That's simply put, okay?
Historical trauma.
Yeah, sure.
So what came back on this is just that people in healthcare services just don't understand why Native communities have the highest amounts of everything bad. And I'm quoting highest amounts of everything bad. Just the numbers that prisons getting as much health care as tribal communities, and measuring the health effects of historical trauma. So that kind of crosses over with the work with the Haas Institute. So yeah, one of the quotes was, ACH doesn't understand the health disparities, historical implications, and why it is still alive today, and lack of care renews historical trauma. So that came out, from several different people that were interviewed. And then the last one is systems level dysfunction. That's the longest, that's the most feedback that we got. And Gerald, do you want to talk about that one, or me?
It's not in my wheelhouse.
It's like
Dysfunction's not
red,
in my wheelhouse.
yeah, red tape.
I understand what they're saying, but I'm not we had another person, Julia, who worked for like 30 years in our behavioral health department at Lummi. She was going to come and speak to actually education within tribes and systems level dysfunction, because she was the quality assurance person for their behavioral health system and actually Medicaid delivery, yeah.
Could you explain for everyone a little bit about historical trauma and what's believed about that?
Yeah, in that book will take you through that whole thing, but historical trauma, for me, is, and we'll just talk about the Hilaire family. And the Hilaire family in Khaitalak, the old people didn't come from the Lummi Reservation. All these communities that we have here identified didn't come from there. They came from the villages in the Salmon Islands. They came from Canada. They came from, like in Bellingham, they came from the post office. My great-grandfather lived there. But in 1855, the federal agents came out. They probably notified them in like 1853. We need to enter an agreement with you because we want to share this land with you. So the leaders then recognized what was going on with so many people coming into this area and infringing upon that way of life, that they felt that they needed to do that. They needed to enter into agreement with them. So they all got in their canoes from all those islands out in the San Juans, as well as up north to the mouth of the Fraser, and went down to a place called Mukilteo, which was like right next door here, right? And they came down in the middle of winter. The treaty was signed in January 22nd of 1855. So it was probably pretty cold, but it was that urgent that they get down here. So they got here and signed the treaty, and then proceeded to realize that everything that the people promised them were not kept. But instead it was replaced by alcohol, it was replaced by our kids being taken away, It's replaced by commodity foods instead of healthy salmon. All those things started to happen. And there was no manner for us to take care of ourselves. And so they had to live with some things that they really didn't understand. And so they lived with it, and then they passed that misunderstanding to those kids that either came back or never came back. And then through that, there's the introduction of alcohol. But there's also this thing that people don't say often enough, this introduction of child sex abuse and abuse. You know, it wasn't part of our structure, but there it was, you know. And not being able to deal with that because the systems to deal with that, like our smokehouse, was outlawed. It was outlawed. Our spirituality was outlawed. So you take away the spirit, you take away your food, take away your family, and it's take, and then what do you have left, you know? You have a whole hell of a lot of trauma and no manner to deal, and then you're kind of like in between two worlds now. You're losing your language, but you don't understand the meaning of these words over here. And that's very hurtful. So I thought about that, and I thought about that, how that affected my grandparents who became alcoholic and passed it on to my mom and dad who didn't drink when I was a young kid, but they had certain personality quirks that I didn't understand, the secrets, because they didn't know how to talk about it. And my mom only talked about it like 2 weeks before she died when she apologized, which made everything really okay then. You know, I love my mom, you know, but then I look at that in myself and those things that I can reveal to my kids. And it takes a lot of strength to understand that, then to also unload it and express it, you know. But then I look at that and just the Hilaire family, then I see, well, what happened to the Lane family? What happened to the Placid family? And the Paul family? It was a lot of displacement, a lot of alcohol, a lot of disease, measles, all those things. It was a genocide, really. This accumulation of those things, but it's not identified in our school books, not identified in our universities. It's probably, I would say, identified within our own tribal government, but as a program, not as a community understanding where, you know, we said, well, this really did happen. We talk about it, and we're going to not allow that to happen. That hasn't really happened yet, but it's talked about in a lot of different forms. But to name it and resolve it completely, I don't think that's ever really occurred. So when it happens, and I started an academy for kids. It's been 12 years ago now. And Ellie, that's where Ellie comes in. Ellie and I worked at the Lummi Youth Academy for a while. And you could see it in the kids when they came through the door. The place was for kids that had no place to live. And they went there to go get their education. So they were either homeless or out of treatment or being threatened to be put into foster care. So we opened our doors. And you could see these kids, and they have that panic button stuck in their brain. And they're kind of like running in circles. And you see the kids that had never been nurtured. They never had those I love yous when they were 0 to 6, you know. Or you see these kids that they can't go to the cemetery to see their mother who had died when they were 6 years old. They can't bring themselves to close that door, you know. So those things, you know. If there's a word for that other than historical trauma, I'd sure like to learn it. But I could just share a lot of stories with you about what that is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Daryl. This is stuck,
It's dysfunctional.
but
Systems level.
it is a little battery light. We just need to go to the next slide that has the movie up.
We're just gonna do the canoe journey one, right?
We're doing the salmon one,
Oh, just
Yeah.
one? Okay.
the first one.
Introduce this part then.
So we, as part of our organization, create original content documentary. So we have a video to show you that, and as you watch, we'd like you to think about how the content that you're seeing is relevant to the work you do. and then we'll have a small discussion afterwards. So we wanted to take a few minutes for. We can pause it, or who's got the clicker? Yeah, we'll take a few minutes to have a discussion, and when we come back, we'll share. And it'd be interesting for you to tell us what organizations you come from, so we have context to understand your answers. So we'll take 3 minutes now. If you want to turn to your partner and discuss the question of how is this content relevant to the work that you do. So we'll take a few minutes, and then we'll share back. Okay, so who's ever ready to share first, I'll pass the mic. And again, just say what organization you're coming from and what connections you saw with your work.
Alan Fisher, United Healthcare. So it to me, it was a really good reminder of not focusing in on just one component of what we're talking about. I think of the patient interaction with a physician, and it's really easy to get hung up on healthcare as that. And this is talking about an entire continuum. There's something that leads to a healthy salmon, that leads to healthy fishing, that leads to a healthy population. And we can very much focus in on the patient interaction with the physician rather than focusing in on what was the things that led the patient to get to the physician's office, and how that also needs to be affected by what we do here. So I think it very timely with the conversation that we were having with Mike just before this, about what we want to do as an ACH in the future, and do we want to be able to pull ourselves away from the constraints that we have on the funding that we have today to look more upstream, be able to concentrate on that which might actually have a better impact that allows for that full continuum. Oh.
Siobhan Brown, Community Health Plan of Washington, and I was thinking of this also in a sense of how when we as managed care organizations are developing benefits and programs, and how we are trying to develop things that aren't just, well, the healthcare authority says we can do X, Y, and Z, so that's what we'll do. But what can we do that is really helpful and useful, and bringing the opportunity for people to engage in health in the way that is most meaningful to them, and not just what is the scientific literature say we have to do or we should do. So.
I had many tangential thoughts. I think that the most relevant one here is I actually spent my elementary and middle school years in Hawaii, and Native Hawaiians do not have the same sovereignty rights as our tribes do here, and that has led to a lot of secretiveness about their culture. And religious practices and things of that nature. And so I appreciate the level of engagement that our tribes are willing to come forward with. And I think that we need to be respectful of the process and keep working on those relationships. So I thank you for your work in bringing these perspectives forward.
Laura Lee with Molina Healthcare, and I just really appreciated kind of hearing from you and seeing the video in terms of just all of the reminders of how much we all have to learn. And I know we feel like we just have taken baby steps, even for me and then for our company, and just starting to try and understand, like what you talked about with the trauma and all of that, and then understanding. I think it was in the San Diego presentation too about evidence-informed, not evidence-based. So that piece is what was running through my head as well.
Debbie Jones. I'm a Samus tribal member. I'm tribal health director. And what I appreciated most about that was this is difficult for me, but the spirituality of it all, And it just reminds me of how we have to have the big picture and the whole person approach, and treat a person where it does the most good for their soul.
Ann Deacon, Whatcom County Government, and I work in human services. And I think that some has already been spoken about what I was going to say, but in terms of adding something new to the conversation, I think that it's really critical to figure out how to make the time to understand who a person is. You know, what is their identity, because from that comes their values. And if you go in presuming, you may be, well, obviously you, who knows where you may end up, but it might not be anywhere that's helpful. But I do think it's just critical to understand that in order to understand what will motivate the person toward health, right? Because if our job is to partner in someone's health, we've got to figure out what is the motivation for that. And that's based in their values, and their values are based in their identity.
Connor Darlington, Homeless Outreach in Whatcom County. A few things came up for me, but what I want to share is that I just feel like we in this region and in this country largely are so disjointed and disconnected from the earth and the water and how everything should flow together naturally. And I think that in this health transformation work and in other social change work, we have a lot to learn from Native American traditions about holistic care.
Liz Baxter with the ACH. I have two competing thoughts, but first, I appreciated that the video made us go slower. Kind of got to a cadence of being on the water, so I found myself just feeling like I was there. But the second is we talk a lot about looking upstream, and what I found myself thinking is, but we don't necessarily think about the stream as being a part of what we're also talking about and what happens within that stream. So it actually just has me even thinking about some of the language that we use as we're talking about health.
I'm Larry Thompson. I'm here with our Cora Foundation. At first, I kept waiting for the PowerPoint to start that would lead me to all these conclusions in English language about what I ought to be doing. And then, fortunately, I gave that up and just felt it. And it made me it made me wonder what more we could do if we experienced our work instead of just think about it.
Hi, I'm Glenn Puckett. I'm with our Cora Foundation, and so many things that have already been said that were in my mind. I'm not sure I can add anything new. I think I just appreciate the reminder that our tribal partners continuously provide to us. It's like a gift. Like we're socialized to forget, and so we need to be reminded almost a daily basis to step back from this sort of transactional way of operating and slow down and be in relationship, and it's really inspirational. I had the same experience. At first in the video, it's like, oh, that's beautiful. That's very peaceful, but that's not where I am right now. I'm at work. Like so I had to allow myself to be drawn out of that space and into a different space, and that was lovely. So thank you.
Hello, Tiffany with the ACH. I appreciate just the opportunity to continue to learn and hear, and appreciate your time coming. It's always very wonderful, and it is a true gift.
Nicole Willis, North Sound, ACH. Yeah, there's so many wonderful things that have been already shared. I I think every time I get an opportunity to hear or watch some of these videos, just the reminder of, not only is it a whole person, but a whole family and a whole community. And I think we do get stuck, and I'm a data person, and so we have these individual clinical metrics and and but we know the science, and we know that they don't just move in the clinic. Like, that's not how anything is ever told us. And the slowing down and the reminding and resetting that what it really takes is truly a holistic approach. I mean, research says that. So how can we kind of break that of, you can't just do it in one setting. It's got to be a holistic approach. So I really appreciate, I think this grounds us often when we get to see this. So thank you.
Wow. Those were amazing answers. So I just wanted to thank you guys for that, and also for letting us bring a bit of this culture to you. And as part of our education plan, we'd like to do some experiential education where some of the partners get to experience this as well. So we look forward to seeing you in the future. And I'll let Daryl close. Oh, you go. He's got his own mic. Drop.
As you can tell, the Coast Salish people are Salmon people. And the Coast Salish people are also winter ceremony people. I think more often than not, people think that we practice sweat lodge, we practice Sundance, and all those round drum things that come from the plains, the beautiful presentation of the Plains Indians. But we're winter people. And through the winter, we practice the bringing out of new songs. We practice the naming of individuals, and we practice memory, and we have gatherings in memory of those that have passed on. And this weekend, we're doing that for my father, who had passed on a few years ago. So we have to leave, and we get back for these things that we do in preparation for the memorial, which is Sunday. And we practice his song, we bring out his regalia, and all those stories get told about our family and the functions and the dysfunctions, so we walk towards that. And I'd like to thank all of you, and as Allie was saying, you're more than welcome to join us in these things that we do as an organization, the folks here as well as all of the tribal members that are part of our organization. On Tuesday, we're going to show this film and another film about a runaway child, a little documentary we did about her. That'll be Tuesday morning at the Pickford, so you can see it in the big screen. It's actually pretty dynamic, and that'll be Tuesday. And then we're having a dance festival over at Whatcom Community College on 15th and 16th if you'd like to come by and see what we do. And it's not me dancing, don't worry, that'll be fine, And then we got invited to make a presentation at the Applied Anthropology Conference in Portland on March 19th, so you got friends down there, let them know we'll be down there sharing some of our work. There's a first salmon ceremony like you've seen in the video. We have that every year. It'll be out at the Lummi Nation School, and if you just look at our website, you can get the exact date. The Samish Water Festival, we have a little camp set up, and we bring people in to share food with us. The cook in the video, he's the world's greatest salmon cook, and he's my older brother. So these guys learned if you hang out with me, we go to these places, you eat a lot of fish. And that's a good thing, okay? And then paddle to Lummi, where there'll be over 100 canoes coming to Lummi from as far away as Bella Bella in Alaska, as far south as the Columbia River tribes. They're all going to converge on Lummi for that time there, and we'll have a camp set up. And if you want to come by, we can take you around and show you what the spirit of the giveaway looks like, because that's the true example of wealth, is the amount that you can give. So that's being practiced there. So you're all welcome. Thank you, Haishka. Yep. Thank you.